as a church, culture is incredibly important. As a leader, culture isn't, and it's incredibly important for the leader to identify what culture am I a part of.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than a leader coming in or wanting to lead and not being aware. The first question you've got to ask is, what is the culture that is being built and what's the desired culture? And if you're not adding to that, you're really taking away from it.
Hey leaders, welcome back to season 3 of the Faith Family Leadership Podcast. With me today is the one and only Pastor Grant Hoyle, our brother from another mother, an Australian mother, if you will. How you doing, man?
Brian, I think for me, God, my family, and this podcast, that's where I want to be. So I'm happy.
Well, I'm glad that you're here, dog. Do you mind if I call you dog?
As long as it's not DOG.
No, this is a DAWG. Put a little street
comfortable with
cred on it.
I love that. Thank you.
Good, man. I'm pumped for today's episode. This is season 3, episode 19. And,
Wow.
and the theme for 2025 is all about culture, man.
Yes.
So we're going to be diving in with our leaders all throughout the year, talking about culture, what we believe, why we believe it. It's going to be a great episode today. But before we get into it, man, how is your 2025 kicking off?
It's going fast.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, fast and furious, but enjoyable.
You recently had a birthday. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was good. 38.
Man, just sounds old.
It feels old.
I'm about 6 months behind you.
Yeah, you are. I think as you start to nip at 40, you reflect deeper than you do when you were nipping at 30. So
Yeah.
a lot of reflection, a lot of introspection.
Would you say there's more space in the rearview mirror than the windshield?
It's about equal at this point.
Yeah.
I'm probably right there in the middle. So that's hard to know that I've only got left what I've had. It'll let you live differently.
Yeah.
It'll let you brush your teeth at night.
Is that a new thing for you?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Any recent headlines to report? Oh, I was going to tell you this. Did you know we're going back to the moon?
I did know about that.
Artemis 2.
Through you.
Yes. Big space guy right now. I'm kind of on like a binge. I've been reading all about NASA.
Why has it taken so long to go back?
Well, people don't really think it's important. That bothers me, but that's not what this podcast is about.
True.
But we're about to go chart some uncharted territory, so to speak.
Yeah.
Rumor on the street is...
I know what you're going to say.
Do you?
Yes.
What am I going to say?
We're prepping for Mars.
Yes, we are.
Is that what you were going to say?
It's exactly what I'm going to say. And the fact that you knew that before I said it blesses me.
Well, you'll tell me that twice a week.
Is it that much?
Maybe.
Okay, well, at least you're educated. If you ever go back to Australia, what will you tell them about the American people?
Man. Well, I think I'm going to introduce myself as a Texan and American. I feel like you guys are absorbing me as your own. I was given a T-shirt when I arrived here and it said honorary Texan. And so I'm still kind of on my learner's permit, but I feel like I'm getting there.
No, you're definitely getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is your old more than you?
Yeah, whenever we go out to dinner, you prefer Tex-Mex.
I love Tex-Mex.
Isn't it a blessing?
I love it.
Yeah.
I really love it.
So good. All right, we should probably get going
Let's
to the
go.
stuff that actually matters. I'm excited about today's episode, Grant, because as we were talking about this next year and really what did we want our leaders to receive, how could we help them grow, I think we all kind of landed on this thought of culture.
Yes.
Who we are as a church, what we believe, why we believe it. I mean, we know when it comes to leadership, we as leaders, we not only create culture, but we carry it.
Yes.
And we've got all kinds of people listening to the podcast, people that have been with us since the jump. And we've got leaders now that are kind of newer to the faith family, so to speak. So we're going to talk today about our mission, our vision, and then we're going to unpack our first value, which is it's all about Jesus. But before that, let's talk a little bit about this thing called culture.
Yeah.
Because right now it's floating around a lot in the airwaves and people are always talking about culture.
Yeah.
Why is culture so important?
Well, you can't fake culture. It's who you are, and it's also who you're not. And so things that you don't allow, things that you can have on a website that we're friendly, but unless the people are friendly,
Yeah.
you aren't friendly. And so it really is the test of what truly something is. And so as a church, culture is incredibly important. As a leader, culture.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly important for the leader to identify what culture am I a part of.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than a leader coming in or wanting to lead and not being aware. The first question you've got to ask is, what is the culture that is being built and what's the desired culture? And if
Yeah.
you're not adding to that, you're really taking away from it.
Yeah. Well, and every time, you add a leader to the organization, culture is constantly either being concentrated or diluted.
Yes, yes,
So as people come in, we have to add concentration to the culture so that we
yes,
get the mix just right.
yeah,
I love the definition of culture. It says it can be defined as a collection of intentional or unintentional behaviors. Culture is either allowed or created, celebrated or corrected.
Hmm.
Pastor Chris Hodges, Church of the Highlands, incredible church, one that we look to quite often, says this: you don't create culture as a leader, you are the culture.
yes,
And so for us, I think it's so important to not just know it in our heart, but to carry it
yeah,
in everything that we say and do, because as we talk about a lot when it comes to leadership, we're the ones that really define the culture
yes,
of our team.
yes,
It happens in our interactions and everything that we say and do. And so for us, keeping this kind of at the forefront,
yeah,
maybe, of our leadership, I think is something that is not only incredibly important,
mm,
but it's so impactful as we add more people to our team and as we do what we're ultimately called to do, and that's to reach people
yeah,
with this message of Jesus.
yeah,
Let's talk a little bit about our mission.
yes.
Our mission. Why do we exist, Grant Hoyle?
We exist to lead people into a growing relationship with
I
Jesus.
love it, man. I love it. When you hear that, what does it mean to you? And let me just kind of back up for a second. You're newer-ish. I've been here now for 10 years this September. You would
Congrats.
be here. Thank you, brother. You would be here for growing on 3,
2.5 years at this point.
2.5 years at this point. So when you kind of first came into Faith Family Church, obviously pretty early on, you heard that this was our mission.
Yeah.
This is what we're led by. This is what shapes all of our decisions. When you came here, what were some of the first things that you noticed that supported that leading people into a growing relationship with Jesus?
Well, I like the statement because you can make a claim that a church is there to help people love Jesus more or to love Jesus, but I think it's a little bit targetless. I like the idea of we are leading people into a growing relationship.
Very intentional.
It's very intentional, and it's also saying something that people need to be led. We all need to be led. And so the goal is not just to create a commune of people who just love Jesus and there's no real target. It's missional. And so you're saying, okay, we're all growing our relationship with Jesus, and the leaders are going to take on the responsibility to structure a path for people to come in, and it's not aimless. And that's one of the things that I saw, is that everything is very deliberate, very intentional. If you were to come to this church and God was to lead you here and you were to kind of say, I don't know what to do, help me, this church can help you.
Yeah.
And if you're a leader, you get to be a part of really people turning up and saying, I don't really know where to go from here. What do I do? It's like, we can take care of everything. What are you doing after the service? We've got next steps.
Right.
What are you doing after next steps? Let's get you on a team. Once you're in a team, you're going to have a leader. Once you have a leader, you're going to have a relationship. Once you have a relationship, you're going to grow. And so there's always a next step for everyone. And so one of the things I appreciated was everything's been thought through at every layer. And really, that's what the church is called to do. It's the Great Commission, right? We're called to make disciples.
Go and make, yeah.
And so in order to make disciples, you need a leadership structure.
Yeah.
And you need a system that is proven. And a lot of people, the Dream Team would know this if you're listening to this, the intentionality that goes into people's journey and their relationship and it's growing with Jesus. I mean, where else do we put our attention on?
Yeah.
So that's really what everything's doing. It's all coming back to this. And so I love it.
Yeah, for me, I love the thought of everybody has a next step to take.
Yeah.
Regardless of how long you've been following God, how long you've been saved, how long you've been in church, everybody has a next step to take. I love the way Pastor Josh says it. He'll say, God loves you where you're at. He just loves you too much to leave you there. And I think it's kind of a beautiful picture of what we're called to do even as believers. Like there's always another step and stage, not only in our relationship with God, but also in how we serve others and invite them in to that relationship with God. And this really is our mission. And this is everything that we do has to point back to this because we're led by that. And then it's supported by our values. We got 4 of them. Know God, find freedom, discover purpose, make a difference. Unpack that a little bit for us, just real quickly.
So know God. So people come to church and we create services where they can know God. It's not this hard thing to do. It's like we create a worship experience where you can have an opportunity to experience God and know him. You'd preach messages that you are going to hear more about the person and the resurrected Christ, that he's alive, that he wasn't a historical figure. So at the end of every service, every communicator is going to give you an opportunity to invite God into your heart. And so you're going to know God.
And I want to say this, I'm cutting you off a little bit, but that's why we're unapologetic in the way that we even design our service experiences.
No, yeah, we are.
You know, I mean, it's like we're designing this entire thing for that moment.
Yes.
And that's why everything that we do is so important. That's why we put an emphasis on what it feels like in our parking lot.
Yeah.
And what it feels like when it comes to checking your kids. And for that single mom that's coming in, does she have a safe place that she feels reassured that she can drop her kids off? It's all leading to that moment where the defense mechanism is down enough where God can speak to them. And it's all kind of this beautiful thing that all leads people to this introductory moment that we want every person to have, where they come to know God. But what do we know? We know that's the first step, but that's not the last one, because the next thing we want them to do is find freedom.
Yeah. And we do that through small groups.
Yeah.
Because it's in relationships where we start to unpack what life has done to us, good and bad, and you start to maybe identify, hey, I got some thinking patterns. I'm seeing life in a certain way, and so we find freedom in relationships. Forgiveness is from God, but healing comes one to another.
It's good.
And so the thing with church is, and where you're getting to know God, is that, you know, if PJ is preaching on a Sunday, it's probably not appropriate to put your hand up mid-sermon and say, hey, just a question on that.
That's when an usher tases you.
Or me and you get a text to go and taser the person.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. It's not just attending your service on a Sunday or a Saturday.
Yeah.
It's about saying, okay, during the week, where am I finding freedom? And you are going to find that in a relationship. You're going to find that in a kitchen, having a coffee with someone, and your guard and your walls are down, and you allow the Holy Spirit to work within that relationship. And so we want people to find freedom in small groups and in relationships.
Well, and I think back on my life, the most meaningful moments came in relationship with somebody where they encouraged me. But even more so, there were those moments where there's enough relationship there and enough time spent together where they could correct me.
Yeah.
And it literally changed my life. I mean, I wouldn't be who I am today without the circle of friends that I had. And that's why this matters so much to me personally.
Yeah.
Because I go back to kind of the history of my own life. I could have went off the rails a lot of different times. And I even remember in high school, things were kind of crashing down around me. And I hope people hear this the right way, but I wouldn't even say that it was actually in the moment my love for God that kept me in the church. It was the community that I was in. They would not let me. I tried to dip and they would not let me do it. And so that's why when it comes to this finding freedom from the hurts that you've been through and from the pain of your past, that's why we must have relationships. And Pastor Josh says it all the time. I mean, a lot of us don't know where to find those people at. We have no idea. That's why if you're a small group leader listening or small group host listening to this right now, what you do is so incredibly vital. Yeah. It goes way beyond just having Cheez-Its and juice at your house or whatever it is. What you are doing is creating a safe place where people can begin to outwork this Christian faith. But again, everybody's got a next step to take, right? So finding freedom, that's a big thing. But then what do we want to do?
Well, it's about discovering your purpose.
That's right. Because we all have a purpose.
We all do. And we're all uniquely made. We're made differently. And so discovering what has God graced, gifted, and anointed me to do. And I mean, we make this so easy for people. We actually have a test.
Yeah.
So they come to next steps.
An assessment. Let's call it an assessment.
Well, it's a test you can't fail.
Those are the best kind.
Yeah, they're the only ones I want to take. I like to know that I'm going to win.
I found freedom from that once I graduated high school, bro.
But you want to discover how God's made you. I think there's like a statistic. I think it's like nearly 80% or around that. 80% of Christians don't know their spiritual gift.
Isn't that wild?
Well, it's crazy because you'll go out in the world and you might be naturally gifted at certain things and you might get paid from an organization to do that, but you weren't given that gift just to make money. God doesn't mind if you make money off it. I mean, it's practical, but you were given that gift to serve God and serve God's people. And so if you don't discover your purpose, no amount of money, no amount of things that the world can offer you is going to bring the fulfillment There's nothing like knowing what you're good at, knowing what God's graced you at, and then doing it and other people benefiting from that. There's nothing better than that.
Yeah.
So we want everyone to know how God uniquely made them. We want them to discover their purpose.
And then we want them to do something with it.
We do. We don't want them just to know that information and just be happy about the information.
Yeah, because knowing's not enough. The difference is always in the doing.
Yeah.
And that's where the fourth one comes in. We want people to make a difference.
Yes.
We were created to make a difference.
Yeah.
We were not created to take the gifts that God placed on the inside of us and just use them to serve ourselves. And I think it's this kind of, I've been kind of chewing on this. What a beautiful picture it is that God would choose us to help do his work. Like he's God.
Yeah.
He could have done it all his own way. I mean,
Yep.
he could have done it all himself, but instead he chooses to invite us into it.
Yeah.
He gives us these unique gifts and purposes, and then we get to not only live those out, but think about the impact we get to make when it comes to serving other people. That's why I think there's no greater call that we could have than to be on the dream team and serve others.
That's what Jesus said, like the one who wants to be the greatest among you will be the servant of all. And so it's about service and it's about serving God's people. And that ultimately facilitates the first three.
100%.
It takes care.
It's almost like a loop.
It is a loop.
It's a loop that keeps rolling.
No, it is. And that's the church.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a way of designing the church in a way where people aren't just hungry to be fed, as people like to say, or have an experience all about them. It's about other people coming in and then being served with the people who have discovered their purpose and now they're making a difference.
Yeah, man. So cool. It's really awesome what we get to be a part of. I mean, when you can, we've been in ministry for a long time and we've been walking with God for a long time. And even before we were in full-time ministry, we were still in ministry.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is sometimes you can get and live in that space for so long that it gets very mechanical.
Yep.
It gets very mechanical. You get very check the box type mode. But I would just encourage everyone that's listening right now, you're probably serving on the dream team in some capacity. Just press pause every now and then and think about how incredible it is that God would choose us to be a part of something like this with all the different things that we waste our time on.
Mm-hmm.
To know that when we serve God and when we serve others, we're actually making an eternal impact.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of investment that you see an exponential return.
Well, it's a great way to live your life.
It is.
What else do you want to do?
Right. What else could be better? So let's talk about value number one, because today's episode is going to kick off a series of episodes where we unpack each one of our values.
Yeah.
Because our values shape our behavior. And as a church, we're led by our mission, right? But we're driven by our values.
Yes.
And our first value, the most important value that we have, is that it's all about Jesus.
Yeah.
Really is all about Jesus. It's the source and strength of everything we do. So in the time that we have left, man, I want to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Colossians 1 verse 17 says, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Something Pastor Josh says, he says, the best thing you could ever do for your family, your friends, your church, your pastors, your leaders, and the people you lead is to build your life on God.
Okay, what does it mean to build your life on God? Because people are hearing that and they're like, yeah, well, I go to church. Yeah. I'll listen to some Kieran Sims every now and then. Man. Shout out, Keith. What does it really mean, though, to build your life on God?
Yeah. Well, the Bible says that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him.
Mm.
And to build your life on God is to understand the words of Jesus and not just be a hearer of the word, but be a doer of the word.
Yes.
And so those who diligently seek him will be rewarded. The world is constantly trying to get you to build your life on something else other than God. It is so counter to try and build your life on God by the world standards.
Yes.
And so you've got to be intentional about that. And if you're a leader, you've got to have a rhythm of how do you seek God diligently. Seeking God isn't just about saying, okay, once every 6 months, I'm going to put a good 12 hours in and I'm going to try and make up for the difference. That's like a relationship with your wife that you have dinner with her twice a year.
Yeah.
How's that going to go down?
Not very well.
I'm not going to enjoy that either.
No.
Whitney, if you're listening, I'd hate that. And so you want to get a rhythm, and getting a rhythm, look at the world. Like every time you're going to go out into the world, you're going to experience the conditions and the elements of the world. And so you want to renew your mind daily.
Yes.
And to do that, you've got to be in God's presence daily.
Yes.
How do you practically do that? Well, something we've spoken about before and we use just as a practical framework is even the first 15.
And I want to say this. I know you're like unpack that for us, but the first 15 is kind of the starting place.
that would be I know we're talking to leaders, so they can hear that. That would be the elementary kind of
Yes.
advice you would give to someone who's just starting out.
Yes.
But every believer every day needs to dedicate a portion of their day. And if you do that better at night, that's fine. If you do that better when you first wake up, that's fine. But it has to be sacrificial. I think if
Yes.
your alarm goes off at 6 a.m. to get ready for work, well, then let your alarm go off at 5.
Yeah.
Go to bed earlier. And so you'd want to wake up, or at night, you want to dedicate a portion of your day to seeking God.
Uninterrupted.
Quiet
place.
Practically listen to some worship music.
Yes.
Worshiping God. You're going to allow the ways of the world to be pushed back and concentrate on God. Put your focus on God. Read His Word. I think that every believer has to get into a rhythm and a pattern of reading the Word. And for those who struggle, I hear a lot of people say, I struggle to read, or I don't get anything out of it. I remember when I was at school and I'd come home and my mum would say, what did you learn at school today? And I would always say, nothing. I learnt nothing, Mum. I don't want to go back. And my mum said, well, for the most part, Grant, most of what you know, it's from school. Yes, at home, you're obviously learning and we're teaching you how to live. But school is one of those things where you look back now, and as frustrating or as maybe, pointless as it may feel when you're young, everything you really know is from those early days of education. And so reading the Word isn't about trying to be wowed every day or feeling these, spiritual highs. It's about a rhythm. And I would even say for a lot of people, reading the Word every week, it may not make a lot of sense initially, but then you'll get into church, you'll be consistent, you'll hear the Word being preached, you're like, oh, that's what that means. And it's about piecing together God's ways. And then when you're out in the world and someone asks you to be deceitful, or someone's telling you or tempting you to do the wrong thing, you're able to go, no, hold on a second.
Right.
And so it's a way of keeping yourself aligned with God.
Well, and I think too, I'm cutting you off,
That's
but
all right. I'm used to it.
I'm not going to talk about NASA, I promise. But you think about that. For us as people right now, especially in culture, we live in a microwave generation where we want immediate results with everything.
Yeah.
And you could apply this to any area of your life, even your own physical health. You don't really see the value in something until you've already been diligent with it for a long time.
That's life.
That's life. And I think too oftentimes we kind of throw in the towel because we haven't had this big wow moment, or God's not speaking to me, or whatever it is. And it does feel like a grind. And it's always a grind until you start to see the fruit of it.
Yeah.
But as we know, even through God's word, when you plant a seed, there's a time that seed has to grow. And so the laws of sowing and reaping and say you get what you sow, you get more than you sow, and you always receive after you sow.
Yeah.
And so for those that maybe feel like they're struggling with that scripture part, keep sowing seed.
Yeah.
Keep sowing seed and you'll receive a return.
Yeah.
And then there's the prayer part.
Prayer is important. Prayer is your dialogue with God. And prayer is not only just talking to God, but it's also listening. It's asking questions. A lot of people don't pray because they're not confident they're doing it well. And
talk about that.
Yeah, well, I would say, I would say prayer has probably been framed up in this way where you go into a room, as Jesus told the disciples, sorry, Lord, and you speak to your Father. But I think there is the permission to be raw and be real. Like you read the Psalms and David, a lot of them start very raw. It's kind of how he feels. But by the end of them, he's praising God. And so I think for me, prayer is like a decompression. And it's when no one really understands what I feel. Sometimes I don't even understand how I feel. It's like I feel feelings, but why do I feel feelings? And so prayer for me is about getting alone with God and allowing my heart to be corrected and allowing Him to speak to my heart. And I think that dialogue is very important. I would pray different every day. Depending on where I'm at. If I'm in a season where life's seemingly pretty good and there's no bumps in the road, there's a lot of praise when I'm praying. There's a lot of thankfulness and there's a lot of gratitude. I think when there's tough seasons, there's a lot of complaining. There's a lot of asking questions. There's a lot of frustration, but God's big enough to handle it. And so I think for me, the best way I try to teach people is there's no right or wrong way to pray. As long as you are praying to God, the Father, in Jesus' name, you can't really go wrong. But I think that's got to be consistent.
Yeah.
I think it was C.S. Lewis or Smith Wigglesworth. Sorry that I don't know. Someone please put this in the comments. But they made the comment. I think it's Smith Wigglesworth. He says, "I don't pray for hours, but not an hour goes by that I don't pray."
Yeah.
And I would say that would be similar to me. I don't wake up and pray for 2 hours back to back, but I would say there's not an hour that doesn't go by that I don't reference or mention something to God from my heart to His, or there's some sort of dialogue. And so I think you've got to find what is natural for you And then I think you've got to be consistent at that.
Yeah. I want to tag on to something you said there, because you've encouraged me in that over the course of our friendship. I think depending on how you're wired as a person, sometimes you even want to approach God and have it all together.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's like, man, I'm going to go knock
Yeah.
God's door, and I better make sure like my shirt's ironed and my teeth been brushed. And I got cologne on and everything. And I remember maybe it was last fall.
Yeah.
I was going through kind of a challenging season. Nothing crazy was going on, but it was just a challenging season for me. And I found myself growing more and more frustrated. And you gave me permission. You said, you can tell God that. And he's big enough to handle it. And so I remember driving down the road one time, and I was just kind of like letting loose, man. And I was, and it felt so good to get that off my chest. And then it was like, once I did, then I almost felt like, yeah, man, I can take it. Now let me tell you some things.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I've even worked that out within myself, because there's even some insecurities in my own self that says, okay, I got to like always have it all together, even when I talk to God. No, like he's a loving father. And as much as like I would want my kids to come to me with anything.
Yeah.
I don't really care how great or ungreat it sounds. And it's like, if I feel that way about my kids, how much more would God the Father desire that for me?
Yeah.
It's a powerful thought to think about.
There's an incredible book I read recently on prayer. I think it's called Living Like Monks, Praying Like Fools. And it's a pastor who wrote it, and he has an incredible revelation on prayer. My daughter's reading it at the moment. I just encourage her. It is so liberating. So I would suggest, if you're looking for good material, maybe we can put that in there.
Yeah, we'll put that in the discussion guide.
Yeah. But I definitely think that's one of those topics where you're right. Religion will try and tell you that God's hard to approach. He's not.
No.
He's not hard to approach. He's really easy. He wants us to approach him more than we would realize. And so that's all prayer really is.
Yeah.
And I think once you do that, God will talk to you, and then you can work out what you want to do. God will put things on your heart to pray for other people.
Yeah. Let's flip it now in the time that we have left. So we've talked about how we can relate to God, even in our own leadership, how we can utilize our relationship with him, and how it becomes our source and our strength for everything that we say and do. But as leaders, especially in the context of culture, we not only create it and celebrate it, but we've got to model it for people. Yeah. So how can we begin to, as leaders, add a higher level of spirituality amongst our teams? Yeah. Even in our behavior and our discussion, how can we begin to see kind of this more spiritual approach to what we say and do? How can we begin to maybe disperse that amongst the people that God has given us this incredible privilege to lead? Yeah.
Well, it says it in the title. It's all about Jesus. And so it's not all about the preaching. It's not all about the worship. It's not all about the cafe. It's all about Jesus. The preaching points to Jesus. The worship points to Jesus. The cafe is allowing people to feel comfortable and come in and spend time in the community, and so they can get closer to Jesus. As a leader, you've got to take on a responsibility. Like a parent, is that people are watching, and they're going to model what you do, good and bad.
Right.
And so as a leader, you've got to realize, what is the main thing? The main thing is Jesus. And so the reason why we're doing everything is because of Jesus. And so you got to lead that way. You can't come in and tell people the only goal of being a leader or a dream team on the usher team is to get people where they want to sit or where they need to sit. No, it's all about Jesus. And the reason why we have structure is so that we're not taking the focus off Jesus. The reason why we have order is so that because if it's chaotic, people aren't going to focus on Jesus. And I mean, you look at that when Jesus feeds the 5,000, he says to the disciples, sit them in groups of 50.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of hungry people there, and it was only 5,000 men. So conservatively, you could say there was maybe 15, 20,000 people.
Totally.
And so he says, okay, we're going to have a moment, we're going to have a miracle, but unless there is order and structure, the focus is going to be off God, and it's going to be on the chaos. And so I think that as a leader, you need to constantly be making people's target their relationship with God. And this makes life easier as a leader, because when you've got someone who has a good relationship with God and with Jesus, they usually self-right themselves. So if you've got a boat that's flipped over, if you're promoting spiritual growth and you're trying to get someone to have a developed, ever-growing relationship with Jesus, a lot of the times the things that you're probably picking up on where they need to grow, God should already be speaking to them on that. And so you're only complementing what God's saying. You're not breaking the bad news. Hey, listen, you're an usher, but you're screaming at people.
Yeah.
It's almost like when someone has a great relationship with Jesus and they're an usher, for example, they're going to go, I shouldn't scream. We don't let people scream at people, but, I shouldn't be screaming at people. And so I think that you need to model that. I think you need to ask people questions. I think it shouldn't be, how did we do today in the usher team? It should be, how's your relationship with Jesus? How's
Yeah,
that
so
growing?
good.
And that's shepherding people, right? And so you're not leading people to be good at a task. You're leading people into a growing relationship with Jesus, and it's making it all about Jesus. So as a leader, that's got to be your target. That's got to be your theme. That's got to be your true north. You can't lead people. I mean, we're not a community center where we're trying to sell a product.
No.
That's not what we're doing.
No.
We're trying to allow people to experience Jesus in a way that doesn't have any barriers or restrictions, and not allow the enemy to create any restrictions. So it's, as a leader, that should be your entire focus.
So good. So good. Yeah. And for those that are listening that are maybe even wondering, okay, how do I begin to work in even some of those questions?
How do I do
thoughts?
that?
Yeah, we actually will include some sample thoughts and questions even in our discussion guide to kind of prompt, because what it will eventually do is, again, it's reshaping our behavior.
Yeah.
And for us as leaders, our leaders in our church are amazing.
Yes.
Carry a
Cool.
high level of ownership. I mean, nothing
Never.
around here happens without our incredible leaders.
No.
And we love them so much. And because they carry such a high level of ownership, many of them are really focused on bringing excellence to the weekend so that people can have that moment to know God. And they may be wondering, okay, well, like, this is kind of a whole other area I haven't really thought a lot about,
Yep.
or maybe don't feel as comfortable or confident in. We're going to give you some prompts.
Yeah, that's
but
cool.
I would encourage you this, you can't steer a parked car. So get started,
Yeah.
like, work them in. You may feel a little awkward about it
Yeah.
at first. That's quite all right.
Or unqualified.
Or unqualified. I mean, theoretically, we all kind of are.
Yeah.
That's the nature of who God is, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think this has been great, man. Thank you for all your
Oh, of course. I love
sage wisdom and
I
insight.
don't know about that, but
I've enjoyed hanging out with you. Anything you want to say to our leaders before we close out the sesh?
I just think you said it. We really can't do it without them. I love this church because of the involvement of the dream team.
Yeah, man.
Really, we were here last night and we had our greeters having a meeting, and I walked into the meeting, and just the quality of people that could really be doing anything on a Thursday night, but they want to be here. They want to serve people. They love Jesus, and because they love Jesus, they love his church.
Yeah.
Because they love his church, they love this church. And so
Amazing, right?
we can't do it without him. So I just would say thank you. It's enjoyable. I love church.
I do too, man.
I love seeing all the people. It's fun. I have fun at church. So thank you for all you do.
Yeah.
And we couldn't do it without him.
Couldn't, man. Love you guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave us a comment. We always like to read comments, positive ones at least.
Yeah. Keep the negative ones to yourself.
Yeah, that's between you and the Lord. You could leave us a review. You could share this with some of your friends. If you want to get access to that discussion guide, you can go to myfaithfamily.org/leadership podcast. As always, it's been a privilege hanging out with you guys today. We can't wait to see you for the next episode.